Okay, welcome to the Held Sessions, honest midlife conversations to help you feel held, resourced, and rooted in yourself again. I'm Shauna Lane, nervous system and unconscious mind coach and founder of Held. And this is a free community where we explore the magic of midlife, ask honest questions, and get real actionable guidance from experts like Monica on everything from anxiety and sleep to hormones, grief, caring for aging parents. And yes, we will probably laugh and cry together and cheer each other on as we do. Here we show up as we are, curious, tired, hopeful, skeptical, scared, all the above. All is welcome here. And I'm so glad that you're spending your very valuable time with us here today because time is just so precious, especially this stage of life. And today we are welcoming Monica Lau into the conversation. Monica is a friend and a registered psychotherapist with a background in hospice and palliative care who specializes in grief, loss, anxiety, relationship challenges, and caregiver burnout. She works with individuals and couples and brings particular sensitivity to sudden loss, complex grief, and cultural experiences of healing. Monica is also certified in psychedelic harm reduction and integration, which is what we're talking about today, and supporting people in exploring these spaces safely and thoughtfully. And I am so grateful to have Monica here today talking about microdosing in midlife. Welcome, Monica.
Thanks, Shauna. I am looking forward to spending this next hour with all of you, talking about something that I really enjoy and just having like a really easygoing time of it. Um,
Totally.
but
We like
I,
talked about this so much like an hour ago. We were on like our prep call and we like just basically did the whole talk already because that's how obsessed we are with this stuff. And I don't want to cut you off, but honestly, like there's so much that we need to get through. I think we might even need to get into a second call at some point, but let's jump
yeah,
in.
yeah, let's do it. Okay, just before I put up on my screen, if any of you guys have access, I'm just curious to see where you're all at with psychedelics and microdosing. So if you could in the chat, just type a one if you're curious about psychedelics or haven't tried it at all, two for if you're experimenting, and three if you're experienced. Just want to take a look at what that is. All right. Cool. So we got a couple of threes, 3.5. All right. So some seasoned. Um, awesome. Okay. Let me do the tech part of this and finagle my screen on here.
Yeah.
Oh, Shauna, can you give me access?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Here we go.
And for anybody who just came in while Monica is doing this setup, she was just asking in the chat how experienced you are with psychedelics. So if it's very, they're like inexperienced, it's one. It's like kind of somewhat experimenting two, or very experienced. Put a three in the chat. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Um, now that I'm in share screen, I can't see the chat very well. So if you
Okay,
have any responses coming up,
we've got another two.
all right.
Let's see what we've got. We've got two more twos.
Okay.
Two, two, 3.5, experimenting, three. Yeah, fun.
Perfect. We all seems like people who are here have dabbled a little bit or a lot. But let's go ahead and get started on this presentation here.
Mhm. Yeah, like how much does high school count in dabbling?
I mean, I
It's
guess it counts.
four,
Yeah.
4.5, 4.5.
So just want to put it out there that the purpose of this session today is about information. Depending on where you're listening in from, just be very aware of what the laws are in your location about psychedelics. If you're in Ontario, it's still illegal. Please do not take what I am sharing here or interpret it as permission or encouragement to use psychedelics. This is really about harm reduction and education. So today we're going to go through a presentation. We're going to have a discussion, Shauna and I, and also leave some room for a Q&A. So today we're going to talk about psychedelics, why midlife, microdosing, some of the protocols, and how you might make it work for you. Hey, so this is me. I'm a Toronto-based psychotherapist. Shauna gave me a lovely introduction, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. Let's get into it. So, what are psychedelics? Psychedelics are substances that temporarily alter your mood, your perception, your cognition, your sense of who you are. Often, when we're talking about psychedelics, we're referring to the classic psychedelics. This is psilocybin, which is like mushrooms, shrooms, LSD, acid, or DMT. And these psychedelics act primarily on your serotonin system, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And they're very, very dose dependent. Depending on how little or how much you take can be a very different experience. Today, we're focusing on microdosing. And psychedelics has the ability to amplify and shift your experience rather than numb it. Now, I've only listed 3 psychedelics here. There are other substances that are commonly put under the umbrella of psychedelics. Um, Things like MDMA, ketamine, and iboga. They are put under this umbrella because they have very similar effects as psychedelics. They're not true psychedelics, except for maybe iboga. And they work on different receptors in the brain. We're going to be focusing on these classic ones that work on the serotonin receptors. So, what are they actually doing to your brain? For a long time, we didn't really know, and we're definitely starting to uncover more about what it's doing. So, these psychedelics activate your 5-HT2A serotonin receptors, which primarily work on your serotonin receptors that affect your mood, your perception, and the way you think. And this activation is thought to temporarily alter how you process the information that's coming in, whether it's sensory, like your hearing, your feeling, but also your emotions. It increases brain connectivity, and cognitive flexibility. I always get those like jumbled up. And basically, this is like that allows brain regions that don't typically talk to each other, give them an opportunity to do that. My next slide is going to have this really beautiful picture that will illustrate this a little bit further. And when we get increased communication with different parts of our brain, we can experience this as new perspectives, like creative thinking, shifts in how we process our emotions. And it does that by reducing the activity in your default mode network. Like, it's a big buzzword in the psychedelic community. I'm going to shorten it to DMN. And this is associated with your self-referential thinking, rumination, our sense of identity. And so, what is self-referential thinking? It's that internal voice that's like constantly filtering our experiences through, like, what does this mean about me? Or how does this affect my identity, my worth? And so in midlife, self-referential thinking can really increase because we might be going through a lot of shifts in our identity and questioning a lot of things in our life. Um, so yeah, this is like where we start to ask deeper questions. Who am I now? What's coming next? What's important? How do I want to feel about the next years into my life? And finally, psychedelics temporarily loosen your rigid thought patterns. And together, these changes can create a window of psychological flexibility. It's not a cure, but it's an opportunity for insight, for shifts, especially when we pair that with support and reflection and integration. Okay, so this is the beautiful picture here. You can see here on one side is depicting your brain and how different regions are connected to each other through these lines. And some of the lines are faint and some of the lines are really strong and bold. I'm particularly looking at that like green one over to the yellow. And you can think about the bolder lines as our really habituated way of thinking or doing things. And it's so subconscious and unconscious. Something comes up in our world and boom, this is our reaction to it. When we're on psychedelics, and this one is using psilocybin, you can see that suddenly the brain goes crazy and there's all these different opportunities for different parts of the brain to connect. You can still see, if you look closely with all of like the lines there, that the bold ones on the normal one, they're still there. Those pathways can still fire that way, but now there's opportunity for other things to happen. And so this is where we're kind of bringing in neuroplasticity. That's where, like, we've kind of heard it, or maybe you've heard it before. When neurons fire together, they wire together. So when under psychedelics, when we have a new shift in thought, if we can reinforce that through habit and integration, then those new firings can wire together, which gives you more opportunity or more options to choose how to move through this world. And how long this neuroplastic window stays open in humans, like, we're still not totally sure yet. Some animal studies show that there is some time. And with human studies, there's some indirect evidence, but there's a lot of anecdotal stuff going on, which is what's making this microdosing and psychedelics becoming something really special. And what does this like ultimately mean for us? It means the ability to change the way we think or feel and how we react to things. I think I also want to add here, like, the process is really helpful if we're deliberate and thoughtful and consistent in order to really make things stick. Kind of like using the gym analogy, like going to the gym once isn't really going to necessarily produce like long-term results. It's all about going to do the work, even when you don't want to do the work. And there's dedication, and results show over time. And working with psychedelics can be very similar, even in these microdosing ways. All right, so psychedelics and brain connectivity patterns. So the DMN is disrupted, we put it to sleep, allowing more communication between different parts of the brain. And this supports a theory of gaining greater cognitive flexibility. And again, cognitive flexibility is that ability to change our perspective, adapt to new information that's coming in, and consider more ways of thinking about a situation. So this is kind of like the difference of like seeing it as this is the only way for things to happen, or I know for me, and maybe some of you here as well, like something will happen and the brain goes, oh, it always happens this way. It's always like this. They're always like this. I'm always like this. Whatever that narrative is, psychedelics can give us that opportunity to go, wait 1 second. Maybe there's another way to engage in this. And I also want to add here where, like, when our mood is low or we're stressed, our thinking can sometimes become a little bit more rigid. And we don't have the bandwidth to, I don't know, be kinder in a situation that we might not, or feel less irritated. So we have a little bit more black and white thinking. We might become more self-critical. And with a bit of that cognitive flexibility, we can have a little bit of space between thought and response. Okay, so like, why midlife and how might this fit in at this stage in our lives? I've noticed an increase in the curiosity around like alternative approaches to support and well-being in midlife. This is a very unique time where we're looking at the past, how we lived our life, and how we're looking forward. We're also experiencing a lot of shifts physiologically and hormonally. Carly did a really great talk at the last held session about anxiety and perimenopause. And it again points to like the fact that things are changing. And during the menopausal transition, women are at increased risk of depressive symptoms. We might be navigating a lot of changes in our caregiving roles, like our kids, they're getting older, more independent, but they still need our care. But our parents might also be aging and needing more support from us. So there can be a lot of strain during midlife, particularly between the ages of 40 and 55. This may be for some also their peak career, in their profession. So there's a lot of different areas that can place a strain on us and then ultimately affect our mood. So wanting to take this opportunity for some recalibration. All right, brain flexibility and emotional patterns. So the potential interruption of repetitive thought patterns can then affect our mood, increasing our emotional awareness or access. So when we're under the influence of psychedelics or expanded states, the way we feel our emotions can be really increased. That could be positive emotions, that could also be negative emotions. And then we can shift from reacting to reflection and soften some of that rigid self-criticism as the DMN goes to sleep. Okay, this is going to be like crappy analogy time, but one of the favorite analogies that I love to use is like algorithms. You know, you open your social apps and your algorithm is just going to consistently show you the same kind of stuff. And the more you interact with your feed, the more of that same stuff you're being shown. And our brains are doing exactly the same thing. So maybe all you're getting on your feed or in your brain and how you're seeing the world is like cat videos. But through a little bit of exposure, a little bit of openness, partnering with psychedelics, we might be able to bring other things into our feed. We'll still get the cat videos, but we'll maybe get like a little smattering of like some other stuff. All right, microdosing. Okay, so what is that? What is that actually? So microdosing refers to the practice of taking like very, very small amounts of psychedelics, subperceptual, in a structured or intentional schedule. I think I'll add here that when we're talking about microdosing, or at least for the purpose of this video and a lot of the protocols, they're often referring to using psilocybin. You can microdose with other psychedelics, but we're going to kind of focus on the psilocybin aspect of it. And I also want to define subperceptual. This is the key difference with microdosing and museum dosing and macrodosing. So subperceptual means that it's a dose low enough that it doesn't produce any noticeable alteration in your perception, your sensations. So it's not like a trip. This would mean that you'd be able to like continue with your daily activities. Some people do report like subtle shifts in their mood and focus or creativity, but we're really talking about something that's like flying under the radar. When we get to slightly larger doses like museum or macro, those are our big trip doses with big effects. That's not what we're typically working with when we're talking about microdosing. So what microdosing is not, it's not a replacement for mental health treatment. It's not a guaranteed mood enhancer. Like this is not an antidepressant pill. It's not risk-free either, and it may not be appropriate for everyone, or depending on what some of your environmental or life stage factors might be. Let's talk a little bit about that. So when might microdosing not be appropriate? If you have a family history of psychosis or schizophrenia, and like especially if it's very close, like mom, dad, siblings, then we probably wouldn't want to consider this as an option, because psychedelics has a way of loosening the ego structure in the mind. It can cause a little bit of instability. And if you have a family history of psychosis, it can actually like encourage that or push that to happen. If you are bipolar 1 or are in a manic episode, if you have any current severe psychiatric conditions, or you're actively dealing with a substance dependence issue, any cardiovascular problems, and if you're pregnant, trying to get pregnant, or breastfeeding, you may want to avoid microdosing. Okay, so your medication that you're taking, your context matters. So medications like SSRIs, MAOIs, and lithium and stimulants wouldn't work well with psychedelics. Part of that is because these medications and psychedelics are all competing for the same receptor, the serotonin network, which can alter how you experience psychedelics. Often in studies or in other locations where you can do psychedelics legally, they'll have you come off of your medications before doing psychedelics to avoid any like negative interactions. And we all know that like coming off of those types of medications require a lot of support and a lot of time. Now, it's also important that if you are currently experiencing any kind of acute crisis, dissociation, high stress time in your life, or you're lacking proper support around you, we wouldn't encourage that using psychedelics, again, because it can have a destabilizing or opening effect. So having a fairly stable foundation, which are able to reflect and be very thoughtful about your experience, can really hold all of this together. Psychedelics can reveal things. Sometimes they're not always easy, and we can't always control what it is that it exposes, and can cause a bit of disruption in your daily activities. So be aware of that. Use it super, super intentionally. Okay. Protocols. These are 3 really common protocols you'll find on the internet. The first one is the Fadiman schedule, and this is involving taking a microdose for 1 day and having 2 days off, 1 day on, 2 days off, so on and so forth. And while you're doing this is going to be partnered with journaling and some kind of reflection. The next one is the Stamets stack. That's 4 days on and 3 days off, with the option of stacking other supplements that he recommends. And this tends to be geared towards brain health and nootropic support. And finally, we have an intuitive schedule where you're following what feels right for you to be dosing on and off. And there's a lot of self-observation for this. So why are we building in breaks? All of those protocols, including the intuitive one, has days off. And this is so that we can reduce any tolerance to the substance, be able to take a moment and compare, like, to our baseline mood. Do we actually notice a difference as we're working with the microdosing? Gives you an opportunity for integration and can reduce overstimulation. So what are people saying about microdosing? This is mostly anecdotal. There haven't been very many studies. Some of them are emerging right now about microdosing that people are experiencing. So on one side, we've got people who are reporting a lift in their mood, greater patience, greater emotional awareness, and slightly improved focus. And on the other side here, we have increased anxiety, emotional sensitivity, changes in your sleep, or just no noticeable effect at all. So just like any kind of drug or substance that we're using, in order to have an effect, it also can have side effects. So there's a lot of really positive and fantastical reports of the effects of microdosing. And just be aware that they're super, super individual. And I want to bring in this concept called non-specific amplifiers, and that's what psychedelics are. And this is, what that means is, like, psychedelics don't just enhance the positive and good things, despite a lot of the really wonderful stories that we hear about it. They just amplify what is already in your internal world. And yes, it can lean into insight and emotional openness, but it could also lean into like heightened anxiety or stress if that's already present. That's why preparation, integration is very important. And how I like to describe this is, like, if you're entering your basement and it's totally dark and all you have is a flashlight, a non-specific amplifier would be like, you turn on the flashlight and whatever that spotlight falls onto would be what you're focusing on. So intention and preparation would be like having an idea of where those things in your basement are that you want to light up, and guiding the process a little bit. All right. And we got integration and holistic support. Microdosing alone doesn't change how you feel. we really need to pair this with reflection and self-awareness, whether you bring in other supports like therapy or your kind of emotional processing, whether it's journaling, mind body somatic practices, and finding a way to track what's happening for you. Support doesn't always have to look like one specific way. Like there's so many ways that we can work with this. Shauna's got some really wonderful modules and breathwork practices, meditations, and guidance on her portal that could be things that support you as you're doing microdosing. So kind of bringing it back to that gym analogy earlier, when we're engaging in microdosing or psychedelic work, like we don't gain better health just by going to the gym alone. We don't gain a better mindset or feeling just by doing microdosing alone. You still have to do other things like supportive practices, your diet, rest and recovery. Those are all really important for health. And having your version of that for microdosing is really important. The goal is to turn these temporary little shifts, these little glimmers that we experience on psychedelics into something that is sustainable and that we can grow with. Let's wrap it all up here. Key takeaways, microdosing in midlife well-being. Our midlife brings a lot of shifts, biological, emotional, identity. Psychedelics can step in to create a little bit of a temporary flexibility and subtle shifts. When we're talking about microdosing, and at least I'm stressing here, these are sub-perceptual amounts and they are highly individual. Sometimes there's a little bit of titrating to get to the right sweet spot for yourself, and that there are some contraindications like pregnancy, family history, medications, your current well-being and state of mind. Always leaning on integration and reflection as part of this practice, and just be really safe as you're doing this. All right. Finally, if you want to continue this conversation at all, whether you want to go a little bit deeper or explore, here are some ways to reach me. So, all right.
Thank you, Monica. That was awesome. Um, I don't know. I'm reflecting on my own. I have so many questions to all ask at the same time, but I think it might be a good idea to allow any of the participants that has a question for you, that wants to, you can like raise your virtual hand or you can put your questions in the chat. In the meantime, I have many, many questions. And I'll get started with my first one, which is just that, I think about like the current climate of like wellness, right? Especially when it comes to, yes, Heather, that's a really good question. Okay, let's jump into that first. Heather's asking, what can I do if I accidentally take too much? Such a good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That can happen. This is why we always hear like go low and go slow. That way there's a chance to kind of acclimate. If you happen to have taken too much, it's really good to have some tools. Breathwork's a really big one. If there are people that you have around you that you feel comfortable talking about, this is I'm assuming you're having a challenging experience if you took too much. If you're having a great time, then like ride it out. I think the reality is like once it's down the hatch, like it's done. You're on the ride for whatever shows up. But if you are having a particularly challenging experience, you took too much, get grounded, whether that's a guided meditation, breath work, reflection, leaning on supports, and yeah, just kind of strapping in. Practice maybe some of those shifts that you might want to be experiencing on a greater level. It's always an opportunity to learn more about it. But yeah, there's kind of no way out but through. I
Yeah.
hope that helps.
Yeah. I've definitely had that experience, especially like, microdosing and then doing something a bit unusual, like going in the sauna or, just like something that kind of amplifies it even more. And then in my experience, like, yeah, eating something and also like just get really somatic about it. Like, what does this actually feel like in my body? If I feel like the more that I try to like explain it, like I'm tripping out, is like then you're kind of like in this like what am I trying to say? Like the explanation of it. But if you can just say, like, oh, my tummy feels a little fluttery and my palms are sweaty and my skin feels tingly, like that's manageable, right? Like you're aware of things being different, but if it's just sensory and not so much like a whole like meaning making experience, I find that that's a little bit easier too. Yeah.
Yeah, shifting the state can help. Like if you're inside, maybe stepping outside, changing your environment may help to modulate some of the experience. If you're playing music that's very evocative, you might want to shift that. So just kind of like toggling the toggles, push the buttons. Um, if it's there's usually a peak and then you ride it out depending on the substance. But if you're
Yeah.
working with microdosing and lower doses, it shouldn't get too out of hand.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, let's jump back into my question, which is that this whole um the whole climate around, especially midlife women and like biohacking and personal development. And so many women are, including me for most of my life, like really obsessed with personal development and this optimizing of ourselves, like optimizing our mood, optimizing our energy, our parenting, our performance at work. And I could talk about personal development all day because, from my experience and my perspective in my coaching practice, it's really not about personal development in the sense that we're trying to approach it from a place of lack. Like, I'm not good enough. I have to do all of these things to like keep up with all of the other women that are doing these really important things. But there's more of like an unfolding. Yeah. So I'm curious, do you think that the popularity and the draw of microdosing is part of this like almost kind of like frantic desire to optimize ourselves? Like everyone's microdosing. Is it gonna like clear my wrinkles and make me less brain foggy? And it's just like such a wild time in this like midlife journey for all of this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that it can turn into that. There was Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind on Netflix, and suddenly there was this huge boom of everyone being psychedelic curious. And coming into microdosing in midlife, we do have a lot of stressors in a lot of different angles. Like, how can I be better at this? How do I streamline that? How can I? And microdosing can definitely fall into that. I mean, what I'd like the experience to be and why I connect with your approach so much is that psychedelics is meant to be an unfolding process. This is something that you're going to be working with intention and with time, maybe in different seasons and different chunks of your life where you're partnering with this work and you get what you need out of it, out of that moment, and then kind of carry on with life, integrate, and then maybe a couple years later, a couple months later, you're somewhere a little bit different where you're thinking, hey, how can I have this support me? But sometimes psychedelics is kind of sold like this silver bullet, like it'll just like magically change your life. And yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could just take microdosing and suddenly our life is like feeling different, whether that is optimized or something other. There's a lot of pressure, I think, for women to be doing everything really well all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially social media, like we're learning all the time about, like this peptide or, oh, you're not taking this supplement? Like, oh, you're not doing this. It's like, oh, should I be? And it's like, well, how's everyone else doing this so well? And from an, neurodivergent perspective too, thinking like, how is everyone else doing life? How am I supposed to life like everyone else is doing it? And yeah, I think there's a lot of things like that even myself, I've been, I should probably buy that or I should probably do that thing. But with microdosing, the way that I like to do it, especially is that very intuitive kind of schedule. It's like, okay, I feel like this is a time when I can really, go use this tool to go a little bit deeper into kind of what I'm already doing versus it being part of my morning, like handful of vitamins that I have to take. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I really like about microdosing is really how flexible it is. Like if you're just coming into it and you need some structure because, you know, it just helps offload some of that decision making, those protocols like Fatimit or Stamets would be really helpful.
Yeah.
But if you're in another space where you might be feeling really restricted by having a schedule and some framework, then intuitive really leans into that well. And you can choose when you engage and don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so another question that I have is that my particular like algorithm and my life experience has, been very like alternative health and spirituality and like experimentation. I've grown up being like exposed to a lot of this stuff, but I think for some people it's really kind of a new and like far-fetched thing. I think a bunch of people on this call are like somewhat experienced or very experienced, but I imagine there's also a lot of like stigma or fears that people have around jumping into taking psychedelics. So how do you help folks navigate that? And maybe what are some of the things that you think people might be concerned about in this regard?
Yeah, I think the propaganda from the 60s and 70s when psychedelics was having like a real boom in the West was when also some of the stuff around like you'll lose your mind, you'll go crazy, you'll never be the same person again. It's using a lot of fear. And I think ultimately that's what a lot of the psychedelics has kind of brought with it, and some misinformation and misunderstanding about it. So when we're talking about like how do we help people through it who are like curious but maybe still a little bit fearful, is talking about some of the safety around it. Um, of the classic psychedelics, and I'm going to stay with the classic psychedelics because things like ketamine do have some issues with it, is that there aren't any addictive, like physiological addictive properties to these things. So we're not at risk of that. We are also using a lot of psychedelics medically. I know there's a question about that. I didn't read it too clearly, but it is being used in therapy and other aspects of like end of life care. Um, and so it's very well monitored and controlled. Um, and the rest is education and letting people know like you do have control over how you're engaging with psychedelics, and why microdosing tends to be a really gentle and soft entry point. At the end of the day, if we're not supposed
Yeah.
to feel anything, then it could be like taking a vitamin and seeing if you have an effect or not. Um, Preparation can also be really helpful, talking through some of these fears, maybe putting together a bit of structure around how you would want to engage with microdosing and support.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm seeing these questions in the chat. Is there a typical time frame for the time you'll feel effects? I know for me it's a few hours, but I'm wondering if there's an average, like how long it lasts for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's highly specific. Usually we kind of go with like biological digestion. So most people, if they are, it also depends. Did you eat? Did you not eat? Are you stressed? Are you particularly
Mhm.
sensitive to these substances already or not? But yes, me too.
Me.
I'd say the structure typically is like you'll maybe start to feel effects within like 30 to 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour. That would be about the time it would take to digest something. If you're taking mushrooms, it has to go through the digestion, get broken down, um, and can last several hours, anywhere between 4 to even 8, particularly on those higher doses. And so that's where I'd
Mm.
probably average that out for a typical time frame, Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But then there's also like an arc, right? Like it's not like it's like you're at the max for 8 hours and then like once you're, especially in that instance where you're kind of like, oh, maybe I took a little bit more than I should have, or it's hitting me harder today. Like you're not going to be at the top for 8 hours. Well, hopefully not.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
I was going to say peak experience. And again, these are more related to those moderate to higher doses. The peak experience probably will hit within an hour to 2 hours and stay around for another hour or 2 hours before you begin to have this like very gentle landing.
Yeah. And there's another question here. Can you clarify legality of psilocybin? Is there medical exemption, prescriptive avenues to utilize as part of therapy? There's an end of life thing, right? Like in Ontario, we can request through our family doctors, or you know more about this than me.
Yeah, I mean the plain and simple of it is psilocybin is still illegal in Ontario. You can get special access to it through studies at this time. So you can't go to your medical provider to get a prescription, but they may be able to submit you into some of the studies that are going on. Hopefully,
Mhm.
that'll start to loosen and have special access in other ways, but that's currently where it's at. And I think that's why there's a big lean towards ketamine therapy because it's already approved and it's being used in other ways.
Yeah. I think a lot of the end of life example is macro dose, right? And
Mhm.
this is like maybe a whole other conversation, but it's something I explored a lot when I was in dealing with cancer treatment with stage 4 cancer, like exploring all of that world. And there's a great film called Dosed 2 with Gabor Mate, and he goes through this whole process with a woman who's dealing with terminal cancer, and it's a really great opportunity to like loosen some of the attachments that we maybe have to, resentments, things that we've held on to, and really connect with this idea that we're all one, which I think is like sort of the ultimate goal, right? Is that connectivity. But it's so many people have done this exact thing when they're dealing with end of life and just feel like, oh, okay, like just this softening of all these things that they've held on to. And in this film specifically, she talks about how, maybe she's only got 6 more months to live, but she gets to live those 6 months as herself. Like she's let go of things that she's carrying that were never hers to begin with, which is just so beautiful, which is very much a different conversation with macro dosing than micro.
Mhm.
But I think that, ultimately the goal is we could set the same kind of goals, right, in the experience and maybe use microdosing with something like breath work or, integration with a therapist like yourself, just to be able to help to, reach these goals that we have for ourselves in life, and this full unfolding that we have as midlife women, that's like, how long have I been performing this way or that way, and like, why do I even do this, and like, this isn't even me, what do I want, who am I? It's a great time to start exploring that kind of thing and using whatever tools that we can to see what works best for us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Holly says, also just a big disclaimer here. I'm tired of optimizing everything. Permission to subtract. Yes.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions coming through? Yes, this is great. So I'm going to wrap the call. Stay on till the end, but I just want to say thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate you and showing up and being part of this conversation. Thank you, Monica. And after the session, come and hang out in the community chat in circle, introduce yourself, share what's coming up for you, ask questions. All of your questions are probably things that other people are dealing with too. And I really want to keep it this like open community space where we can share. You can find Monica at her website, Long Way Home Therapy, or Instagram with the same name, same handle. And a little preview of what's happening next month. We'll be joined by Natasha Cook, who is a functional holistic nutritionist, and she'll be talking about something in the realm of gut health, hormones. She's a gut health expert, brilliant, and all the hormones and all of the stuff, all of the important things. So thanks again for being here and being part of the health sessions. I'm really glad that you're here. And I'm going to stop the recording.